just realized that the battery life on my laptop. I have to plug in right now. Anyways,
Okay. Hey,
okay, so
Eric.
okay, so
We are back with discussing did Tertullian teach the Trinity? And at this point, we have a resounding no. Tertullian did not even come close to teaching the Trinity.
yeah,
Uh, the Trinity is so far departed from what Tertullian was teaching. He used the same words that Trinitarians see, and they use the word concept fallacy by overriding what they think Tertullian is talking about without trying to understand actually what Tertullian is talking about. And Tertullian talks about how they are two separate beings and two separate, basically, and we'll talk about this in the upcoming episode here about how they are two separate gods, which he says. So, yes.
yes, and one thing that we have to keep in mind is um, they're using something called the two powers of heaven. It was a Jewish doctrine, and we have not discussed this before, but it is something that
Yeah.
we have to remind ourselves that the reason that this um, that the incarnation was so powerful, that Jesus was the Messiah and all that, and that Christianity took so powerful, and the Jews rejected so much, was because of the two powers having doctrine. And if you notice, modern day Jews, they don't even talk about this doctrine anymore. And
Right.
it is and you have like a Jewish scholar like Benjamin Summers who said we need to start talking about this kind of stuff again, or Stephen Siegel. Like I think when he wrote his work, The Two Powers of Heaven, he literally discussed we need this. This is the actual Jewish doctrine that was in the Old Testament.
Or Margaret Barker, who talks about the Jewish second God. You know, the Son of
Yeah,
God was their second God.
yeah.
And
So one thing that we need uh, to understand why this doctrine is so powerful is that it teaches that the Father has an offspring, which is Jesus, and Jesus is less a divinity, but he is as far as the Father because the Father gave his name in his Son, and is speaking as if he is the Father. So he has the
mhm.
same authority as the Father. But it does not mean that they're one being, but there are actually two beings. And the fact that you see multiple passages in the Old Testament that shows is pre-incarnation subordinationism refuse a lot of like Augustine Trinitarian idea that Jesus is only subordinate in his human nature, not his
Mhm. Yeah.
divinity.
In fact, everything Tertullian talks about is
Yeah,
pre-incarnation.
exactly.
He's completely talking about before Jesus comes to Earth. So this idea that hypostatic union and that Jesus is subordinate in his human form. No, because Tertullian doesn't even talk about his human form. He's talking about pre-incarnation. He's talking about in heaven, before this even happens. The wisdom was created during the creation. I mean that's when he's talking about the creation of Jesus, or the creation of the Son was when during the creation he was the first thing created. But he had this dual existence where he existed in his mind as the logos, as this thought, and then when he spoke, when God spoke, out came the Son as a separate being with his own mind, with his own logos, his own reasoning, his own will, and his own being. He was a separate existence from the Father. So what
Exactly.
we kind of,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. They got this, Totally got this entire, that's my point. Tertullian got this entire theology based on this two powers of heaven dogma that was passed on from from Christian to Christian, and that can trace back all the way back to the New Testament. In the Old Testament, it's just something that is complete, that is part of their history, and it's something that we need to discuss. And even in the Book of Mormon, and this is an argument that a lot of people that we need. Yeah, even though we talk about Tertullian, the point of this podcast is to talk about Tertullian, but ultimately we were trying to show that LDS teachings reflects this kind of theology, and
Yes.
the Book of Mormon is like a lot of people will quote passage in throughout the book is saying like, oh, there's only one God, the I am the Father, so on and so forth. However, whether people completely misunderstand about those passages, what the book was really doing is using the two powers of heaven dogma. He's literally
Hmm.
saying that yes, there's only one God because the Father is a sort of all divinity, but Jesus also pre-existed. He was there doing all those things on the Father's behalf, as if
Right.
there is only one God. It is
Yes.
something
They act
that
in
we
unity. They are a tri-unity, whereas you have different minds, you have different wills, but they are unified in their purpose so that they become one, where you have the sender who sends the son, and the son does everything that the sender sends him to do. So you have the sender and the sent, and you cannot send yourself. And Tertullian actually talks about this here in chapter 10 and later. I
exactly,
mean,
exactly, exactly. And this is. And I just wanted to, like I said, I only bring this up because we have not discussed it before, but it is something that we have to keep in mind as we read these passages. It's not something we talk. It's not talking off. It's not. It's not. But it's something that it is an important doctrine that we need to keep in mind. So,
yes.
so I wanted to discuss chapter 9 again briefly
Okay.
because um, so so this is what he says. For the Father is the entire substance, but the Son is a derivation and a portion of the whole. As he himself acknowledged, my Father is greater than I. John 14:28 in a psalm his inferiority is described as being little lower than the angels. Thus the Father is distinct from the Son, being greater than the Son, in so much as he is one as he is begotten is another. His though he is sent is one, he is sent is another, and he again who make is one, his though is through whom the thing is made is another. I want to
Yep.
point out I want to point out two very important things here. He's talking about how the Father is the entire substance, and the Son is just a derivative of the portion of the whole. So Jesus is not the full substance of the Father. No Trinitarian after the Council of Nicaea will make that kind of argument.
Right.
The
Yeah. No, I
you
mean,
say it's
that is a Nicene argument.
yeah it's yeah and it is literally and and if you look at the Catholic at the Innocents Creed, it will say in there that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, they're all equal. They cannot have the derivation. They're not. They all share the full essence. So this is direct. This in itself refutes the idea that Tertullian is a Trinitarian in any shape or form.
Hmm. Yes.
Another point, and another point that I want to make is that a lot of times Trinitarian would say that my Father is greater than I is a reference that Jesus is his human nature. But that is not what Tertullian is literally describing here. He's literally
Hmm.
saying that Jesus is great, is inferior than the Father. There is no qualification into it. Uh, um, in a sense that it is only in this or this sense, but no, it is just plainly straight of the Father is greater than I.
And not
Oh,
only as we will discover in this as we read today, but
yeah,
that he thought that the he was less than the Father's nature. I mean, he thought that Tertullian believed that the Son was a lesser nature than the Father, especially when we get into what we actually don't agree with, um, because Tertullian actually believed that the Father alone could not be seen; it was impossible for anybody to see him, and he taught that. Which, as LDS, we believe that the Father can be seen. So we actually disagree with Tertullian, but he says that
well,
because the Father is unseen and that Jesus can be seen, that there are two separate natures in the sense that we can see the Son, but we can't see the Father because we see the Son's nature. So
and,
it
and
gets
we will
really
discuss
interesting.
more. Yeah, he's good, Richard. But I just want to really point this out of anyone, and this is big towards inspiring philosophy, where he tried to say that Tertullian is somebody who supports the Trinity. Yeah, this passage alone discredits entire argument of saying that the Trinity is in a shape or form supports the Trinity.
Right. And he's basically saying here at the end, he says that the words matter. Um,
Yeah,
he says, for of course, all things will be what their names represent them to be. In other words, if you're calling somebody a father, that's what they are. They aren't, this isn't just a type of relationship. They are a father. Words matter. If you're going to use the words father and son, then you need to understand that that's what they are. They are
yeah,
father and son. And what they
yes,
are and will ever be, that will they be called. And the
exactly.
distinction indicated by the names does not at all admit any confusion. He's saying
Oh,
words
oh,
matter.
yeah, oh, yeah,
It,
you're using a different translation. I was like, why? And I can see the argument you're saying, but my translation is a little bit different. But yes, like mine was saying things like um, the declaration of the distinct personality. Um, of course, all things what the name represent them to be, and there are ever will be that will be called. Again, yes is yes, no is no. For what is more than less comes of evil. So basically, yeah, literally, is as I said, is names matter, and
yeah,
the and the is which goes back of what we were discussing last week, 2 weeks ago about Jesus and the Father having his own existence. Literally, because having a name, you're essentially saying that this person has his own existence.
yes. So
And if they are his own existence, then guess what? The Father and the Son are two separate beings, which means they're two separate gods.
that's right. And he describes this below, which we're going to get to because it's cool. So,
Yeah.
all right. Um,
Now, chapter 10.
chapter 10. And so the first thing I have is this is right here. It says, it is, however, one thing to have and another to be. Now, this is interesting because in English, we don't understand this. And I think French, you understand French, is there's this thing that you have and this thing that you are. And I know Spanish. So Spanish says soy. Soy says that it's like soy. Um, I'm white. I am white, right? Or I am a male.
You need to
That is
text Terry's
something that I
address
am.
and let him know your new address needs to be updated because our address is still showing as Charles J. Fraser Ave.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
Here we're having a little interruption.
yes, all right. Yeah.
Okay. So with French and Spanish, you have I am and compared to I have. So soy says that it is something that you are. I am male, right? And I think this is
Oh,
similar in
oh, oh,
French.
oh, oh, you're talking about how names have genders, like words have genders.
Not necessarily. I'm talking about so when I say I am something rather than I have. So in if it was something that I am something that I inherently have inherently am, like I am male, I am human, I am white, I am or something that I temporarily have, and they use tango. So tango says tengo hambre, which means I have hunger. It doesn't necessarily mean I am the embodiment of hunger. So when we
Yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah. J'ai faim. I am hungry.
yeah, I am hungry, but it means, it doesn't mean that I am called hungry. It means
Yeah.
that I have something. I have hunger. It's something that I temporarily have that, I need
J'ai
to
besoin,
fulfill.
j'ai besoin de la nourriture. I need food. Yeah, that
Yeah,
kind of
I
thing.
need food. Right. And that's something different than something that you are, right?
Yeah.
In French, what
Yeah,
is
yeah,
it
yeah,
in French?
yeah. Je suis un homme.
Okay.
Suis, basically,
So
I am a man.
sui is the same as Spanish soy. Okay.
Yes.
So soy and
Suis,
sui are the same thing.
suis is the verb être, which
Okay.
which is conjugated for je suis, il est, je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont. Though yeah, it's a verb.
Yeah. Which is it is something that you are or that you to be as compared to something that you have. So
Yeah.
when he's talking about, I go back to Spanish because of this. I mean, he's saying that where did it go? It says it is one thing to have and another thing to be. For instance, in order to be a husband, I must have a wife. I can never myself be my own wife. I mean, this is common sense, people. You can, in order to be a husband, you have to have a wife, right? In like manner, in order to be a father, I have a son, for I can never be a son to myself. And in order to be a son, I have a father. It is impossible for me to ever be my own father. So,
Yes,
in other
and
words,
it goes back that as as I discussed in our first session, where Tertullian used dialectics, which basically is a form of logic about like you try to analyze different ways to get a conclusion. He's been trying to use logic here. You
mhm,
cannot, and this is something that I that I'm seeing so much about Tertullian's writing is you need in order to have faith, you need to have like you can't just say things that is illogical.
right,
The Trinity doctrine is a illogical doctrine because he's saying that somehow there's one God, but there is a distinct person, but you cannot say there's two gods because that is tritheism. Uh, try tearing the heresy. Basically, like if you try to analyze the doctrine, it always falls into some sort of heresy, and
Hmm.
and and at the end of the day, you say, oh, it's just a mystery because
Yes.
and the reason they have to say it is a mystery is because they have to say they are trying to hide how illogical the dogma really is. And
Well, they hide through definitions. They simply take father and son to mean something that father and son are not. So,
exactly,
and Tertullian is saying, hey, words matter. Father and son are literal. He's showing that these are more than just relationships. They are what they are. He is a
and
father, and there is a
and,
son.
and it goes back to they have their own existence, and it also comes back being logical.
Hmm.
You cannot be something in a philosophical sense if their own doesn't have its own existence because it defies logic.
That's right. And when you talk, you just said existence, which is a very good point because the son has to have his own existence. If he doesn't have his own existence, you are not a father. If you are a father of just a manifestation, that's not being a father. That's not what a father is. A son being a son that does not have his own existence is not a son who has a separate existence from his father. So the son has to have his own mind. He has to have his own will. He has to have his own existence, his own being, his own nature. He has to have a completely separate everything in order to be a son. My son is a completely separate being, existence, mind, will, everything from me. I am a father because I have a son who is separate from me. That's
And
the
going
meaning of
back,
the word.
yeah, and going back, what he was saying is about like in order to be a father, about like a husband and a wife. Guess what? In order to have a wife, the wife has to actually exist. In order to have actually a
Yes.
husband, the husband actually has to exist.
Yes. You can't just say, "Oh,
Which
I'm married," and have a play pretend wife. No, that doesn't work. God is not a liar. He's not sitting here lying about his relationship with his son. So, yeah. Um,
yeah, it's
that is not
once
the Trinity,
again
folks. I'm sorry, but that is not the Trinity. Trinity, you're making them the same existence, the same being, with different manifestations. They're just pretend manifestations. They're not, actually separate beings with their own separate existences. So, um, yeah. Did you have anything? Because let's see. Let's see. I have in this way. In this way, they hold the monarchy. Now, remember, a monarchy is a government. A monarchy is um, uh, when we talk about the Biden administration, it's Biden's administration, but he's not alone. He has an entire administration underneath him. When we talk about the Biden economy, which Tertullian uses both of these words. Monarchy is a type of government where you have the father who's at the top, and then his administration, which he administers everything to his creation. So the monarchy is a collective. The administration is a collective. Economy is a collective. These are not single being things that uh, that the father controls everything by micromanaging everything. No, he sends his son. So in this way, they hold the monarchy, but they hold neither the father nor the son. Well, with God, it is nothing is impossible. They say. True enough. Who can be ignorant? God could do all these things, who also can be unaware that the things which are impossible with men are possible with God. The foolish things are also of this world. God has chosen to confound the things which are wise. We have read it all. He's saying, I've heard all these excuses. Sure, God can do these things, right? He understands that. Therefore, they argue it was not difficult for God to make himself both a father and son, contrary to the condition of things among men. But he says, let's see if I can get to it. It says, he is able to do all things that he's, okay. He is able to do all things. Suppose that he has actually done what he has not done, but we must inquire whether he has really done this. There's a difference between what God can do and what God does do. And he's bringing it back to, he's saying, I understand it's not impossible for God to do all those things you're talking about. It's not impossible for God to be his own son and for, whatever. But did God really do that? No, God did not really do all of this logical fallacies, illogical, God is not into mental gymnastics, saying yes is yes, no is no, and anything more than that cometh of evil, because
And
God does not lie.
one thing I actually before I make the comment, what you just said, I want to go back very briefly. And then previously, he made a statement about for I have ought to have father in order to have son. I cannot therefore be a father because I have another son. Who makes a father? Not all of this must be the defiance of the devil. So basically, saying he's calling this illogical stuff being from the devil because God will not contradict himself. He's using golden logic. He's going to do this, and anything that is illogical, it has to be a device from the devil, which is
Yeah,
actually important. Going back of what you were saying about sovereignty and all of that. Yes, God will do this thing, but it's also an argument against Calvinism because
mm-hmm.
what 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 does Calvinism loves to do? Talk about God sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
Is it is a word that they love to use at every chance that they get. It is a because God is so powerful, He can decree anything that He wants.
That's right. He can do these logical impossibilities. He can be evil and good at the same time. No,
No, because
that is the device of the devil.
exactly, exactly, and God will not contradict logic. He's not going to make something that it is illogical, and that is something that
Well,
we yes, and it's yes, we kind of delve into the topic of Calvinism, but it's kind of like but it's kind of important thing to consider the fact that God's sovereignty is doesn't mean that He contradicts Himself.
right, yeah, it's a lie. When you're
Yeah,
when you're saying that God contradicts himself, that's basically it's a form of lying, and God cannot lie. So a lie comes from Satan. If it's a lie, we know where that lie originates. It doesn't come from God. It comes from Satan. Satan is the one that lies. He's the father of lies. So anytime that we see a logical contradiction, or we see God trying to contradict himself, or I should say God doesn't contradict himself, it's those Trinitarians who try to formulate or try to resolve a contradiction that exists by their own creation of it, because they've been lied to by Satan.
exactly. And and this is something that I am. The more I'm reading this, the more I'm like it reinforces the church of everything that we teach is logical
Yeah.
in one way or the other. It
Yep.
always makes some sort of logical sense. Now, of course, like some people will say, but what about eternal regression? Is it that illogical argument? And we're like, well, I do believe, like, for me, I personally believe there is a unbegotten source, or there's like an actual beginning of everything. But if there's an infinite amount of regression, guess what? We can be in the millionth cycle of where the father is, where there's a new father going through immortality.
Yeah. So the law of regression doesn't, it's not illogical. It's
Yes.
beyond our comprehension. And basically they're appealing to incredulity, saying, well, I don't understand it, therefore it's not true. Well, that's not it. That's not illogical. It's just basically saying incredulity, um, but it's at least logical. So
Yes. And that's my point. It's like it's logical, unlike the Trinity, who is illogical, or how God being the author of evil being illogical.
right. Yeah, you've got. I mean, we get into the problem of evil and how, they have to believe that God created evil, which, it's, you can't get out of it. God created evil, or He at least created the being who created evil with the full knowledge of Him, understanding that He was creating the being who was going to create evil, which means He's the creator of evil.
Yeah,
So
and you get that as soon as you get the doctrine of ex nihilo,
yes,
because God foreknowledge, God foreknowledge, and He's omnipotent, omnipowerful, all of those things. As soon He creates every ex nihilo, He knows that when He creates Lucifer, He's going to create evil.
well, and not only that, but Tertullian, since we're on Tertullian, and if we want to discuss Tertullian, he actually believed in, he fully accepts, yeah, God created evil. Okay. So
Yeah,
God,
there
he
are.
says this, and he says this in Against Hermogenes. He's like, yeah, God created evil. Deal with it. It's like, okay, but the problem is that any being that creates evil is evil, and he doesn't really resolve that. Tertullian doesn't really resolve that problem, but
Yeah,
Christians deny it. Tertullian accepted it fully.
yeah. Which is something I like about the early Christian. They're honest. Yeah, they're actually honest. They're not trying to play stupid games. They try to go around what their passage actually means, what they're trying to say. No, they're going to call yes is yes, no is no. They're going to call it as is, and then they're going to deal with it.
Yep.
Anyways, let's go to chapter 11.
Chapter 11. All right. So the identity of the Father and the Son. So here he goes, and he's talking about how they are separate beings, how they have separate identities, separate existences. And let's see, I don't really have anything. Let's see, for if he calls him a son, and if the son is none other than he who has proceeded from the Father, and if the Word has proceeded from the Father himself, he will then be the Son and not himself from whom he proceeded. So he's basically saying, you've got to have two separate existences for these things to happen. Um,
It's just repeating arguments that yes, it's slightly different, but he just keeps repeating the same argument over and over
mhm.
again throughout this entire text. But
Yep.
yeah,
So let's see. This one here is kind of uh, it sounds Trinitarian, and I know I've actually heard other Trinitarians use this. They say, you must bring forth the proof which I require of you, one like my own, that is, you must prove to me that the scriptures show that the Son and the Father to be the same, just as on our side, the Father and the Son are demonstrated to be distinct. And he says, I say distinct, but not separate. For as on my part, I produce the words of God himself, my heart has emitted my most excellent word. Now, what they hear, they see, well, he's distinct, but not separate. Now, when Tertullian is talking about separate, he's not talking about, he's not saying that they have completely separate. What am I trying to say? He's not saying that they're completely separate in their wills and their entire purposes. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that they're distinct in Father and Son, but they're united in their in what they want to do. So he's using separate in that term, that he's saying that they're united. And when my wife and I, we're not separate. We're one flesh. We're married. We don't go out and do things that are completely out of context of our marriage, right? The Son does not do the same thing. He does not separate himself from the context of their unity. So they are separate beings. They're just not separate in that way where they will separate and go and do things contrary to their unity.
Yeah, and it goes back to what Origin was saying. There's like, in one sense, there's two gods, and in another sense, there is only one God.
Yes.
And it talks about how they're unified. There's like it is again. When he talks about one God, he will quote one flesh, how the husband and wife become one flesh, to demonstrate the unity between the Father and the Son.
Mm-hmm.
Which again reinforces what you're saying is about this whole unity between the different existence of Father and the Son. It's 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 all the same thing.
Yeah. So I want to read, let's see, the comparable text in. So I really like this translation. This is a really good
Okay.
translation by Suter. He discusses these things as well. So let's see if I can find the correct area. The New Advent, the ANF's translation by Schaff and others that translated this one. I'm not impressed with it. I really like this other translation here that you can get online. It's through archive.org, and you can look up Tertullian against Praxeas and look up Suter is the author or the translator. And he says, let's see if we can find it.
Like is it, this okay? The fact that you're about to quote is okay. Is it about like uh, about who's begotten, who's begotten, who's begotten?
Yeah, it's right here. So here's the quote. Okay, it says, or set forth the proof I demand like my own. So he's basically saying, I've been proving all these with scripture, with logic. Now you need to set forth your own logic, your own scripture to indicate the same to be the Father and Son in the same way as us, with the Father and Son are indicated differentially, I say, and not separately, or they are not separate in the sense that they are separately, which is used in a different way. So they are not separately. Again, like my wife and I, we are unified. They are not separately doing their own things. The Father, the Son does everything the Father sends him to do. He's not out there doing his own thing separately. So that's why I like this one, this translation.
Makes sense.
All right, let's see. And I had. Do you have any other quotes that in here that you were looking at?
Yes. And I was waiting because I'm going to read the whole thing. Um,
I've got
I
it up
said
here.
this is
So let me
yeah.
find it.
I
We
can
can
read.
read it together.
Yeah. Okay. So I s- I go from always from I said this thing to all the way to did I begin myself and whatever other passage are the same effect. Okay, that
I
whole
said.
passage.
I said. Okay. Go ahead and start.
Let's see. Go up.
Here's the beginning of the
Let's see.
chapter. I say. Let's see.
Oh, why did it went dark on my screen? Okay, if you're able, this is the part that putting in the chat. So where is that translation matches that?
Go ahead and read it. Go ahead and just start reading it.
Okay, okay. So okay, I said this thing, but not separate. But for who was a part of producer, the Word of God Himself, but her has imitated my most excellent word. So, so in you, in like manner, ought to adduce in position to me some text with God has said, my heart has imitated myself as my own excellent word in who was sent forth, and he is both the word and God. I I bid you also observe that on my side I advance the passage where the Father said to the Son, "You are my Son. This day I have begotten you." If you want me to believe him to be both the Father and the Son, show me some other passage where it declare the Lord said to himself, I am my own son, today I begotten myself. Or again, before the morning did I beget myself, and likewise I Lord possess myself the beginning of my ways for my own works. Before all the hills too did I beget myself, and whoever other passages are the same effect. So the reason
Mm-hmm.
this is an interesting argument that Tertullian is making. If Jesus doesn't have his own existence, it means that Jesus will be the same as the Father. Something that a lot of Trinity once again fell into this category where they say there can only be one God, and Jesus is only subordinate in his humanity. Yet it clearly shows it shows a clear distinction who is the begetter and who is the begotten, and he doesn't try to explain away what those passages means. That is something that David Berger once said that the church fathers simply take the plain reading of Scripture and and this is the faith that we need to follow. Something that is um, something that all too often the Apollos always fell into. So basically, what I'm trying to say is I like a lot of Tim Jackson was like, yeah, well, it's not exactly like begotten is not actually the actual firstborn of creation. It's not actually begotten the way we think is begotten. Like it is try to call passages um like Joseph, I think Joseph, where Joseph and Ephraim, where one of his the begotten son, but even though he's actually the second son, is showing a bunch of several passages where the begotten it was a title given to him, even though they're not exactly the firstborn. Another way it says like, was the firstborn of the dead? Is he actually the first dead, or like it's like their
Yeah,
their argument, but
begotten
it's like
means begotten. When you look at it's monogenes or monogenes is it means mono, meaning only, right? And genes, which is begotten, and they say, well, he's his only begotten son. Well, the thing is that, yeah, Isaac was also was considered Abraham's monogenes, his only begotten. So Isaac was only begotten of Abraham, but yet Abraham had 8 sons. Abraham had Ishmael first. So Ishmael would have been the first begotten. The Isaac was considered his only begotten, and then he had Abraham married Keturah, and Keturah gave him 6 more sons. So obviously, only begotten does not mean that you are only the only son of Abraham. When Abraham has 8 sons, and there's one that's unique. Isaac is called the unique son, the only begotten, the monogenes of Abraham. And so Abraham or Isaac is unique from Abraham in the sense that he is the birth child. So when we talk about, that that the son is the only begotten son, no, he's the only unique son, because the Bible talks about the sons of God, talks about the stars of the morning, and how Jesus is the bright morning star. So we have the bright morning star who's brighter than all the other stars of the morning stars. So
I
yeah,
just I just thought about something right now. I am looking into my Mount's complete expositional dictionary of Old and New Testament, and seeing if I can see what he has to say on this topic. Uh, begotten, begin. Really on the sun.
but
It has it has to talk. Um, he has to talk about that stuff somewhere in this dictionary.
But if we want to go back to Tertullian, this is
Yeah.
kind of an important one. Is when we look at chapter 6, and he says that he uses a very distinct word. Let's see. No, not chapter 26. Chapter 6. Chapter 7. It's in chapter 7. It
Yeah.
says
Go ahead.
this is the perfect nativity of the word. Okay, when he proceeded from God. So nativity specifically refers to a birth. To when we talk about the begotten Son of God, and we talk about the nativity of the Word, the nativity means birth. He was born as a son of God. And there's also other areas where he talks about the womb. If we look, search for the womb, um, so
Okay.
he
Okay.
so
Ooh,
this
this is
is chapter. This is actually chapter 7 too. Chapter 7, he talks about the Colossians 1, 15. He says, and this is the same you were talking about. Colossians 1:15 is the firstborn or the only begotten, and he says, in a
yeah.
way peculiar to himself, from the womb of his own heart, the Father testifies, my heart has emitted a most excellent word.
Yes.
So
And
something that emits is born.
okay. This again. This is going to be a long. Like I'm about to quote a fairly long passage, but
Okay.
this is going to. For those who doesn't know, this is the book I'm about to quote in.
Okay.
This
So
is
this is Mounts.
Mount's complete expositionary dictionary of Old and New Testament word. This is a scholarly book of a scholar who literally wrote. He's a New Testament scholar who teaches teaches how to speak Koine Greek. So this is not This is not some layman. This is an actual scholarly work. So, son, or in the Old Testament, is a noun. Ben. Ben has a wide variety of nuance in the Old Testament. One of the most often used word in the Old Testament is Ben. Expresses family or
So you're
hetero.
saying B'nai. You're saying B'nai.
Bene.
B'nai is son, right? Yeah, B'nai. Okay.
Yeah, Bene. It's Ben. There's a little thing on the top. Like
Oh,
I
okay.
don't like. Okay, if you actually see the word,
Yeah, it's a little. Let me see if I
yeah.
can. No, yeah, can't show you. Yeah, it's not working. Go ahead and keep reading it. But we're
The
talking B'nai, B'nai Elohim, or
Bene, yeah,
B'nai
Bene, Bene,
B'nai
yeah,
means son,
yeah. So Bene express family or hetero relationship
or
or particularly as
or actually let me uh, just break in one more time. B'nai are Ben. Ben means son of. So when we talk about Benjamin, or when we talk
okay.
about Ben, um, uh, yeah, anything Ben is son of.
Yes,
Ben,
yes.
son
A
of.
family or hetero relationship, particularly a son begotten by a father. Sometimes
Right.
the plural of Benin means male children. Genesis 5:4, where Benin or Benot daughters are mentioned together, but the plural can also mean children of both genders. The woman, he said, I would greatly increase your pain in childbearing when you bear children. Genesis 3:26. Bene can also denote other family relations such as brothers, your father's son. Genesis 49:8. Your mother's sons. Judge 8:19. Be grandchildren, sons, sons, or children. Genesis 45:10, Jeremiah 27:7, Psalms 128:6. C. Nephew is brother's son. Genesis 25. Daughters-in-law, your son's wives. Genesis 8:18, and E. Cousins, sons of an uncle. Leviticus 25:49. In some cases, Beni by itself may denote grandchildren. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren, and his daughters are blessed by them. Genesis 31:55. So basically, you can see that the lot of relationship. The fact that Benet carries the general sense of hereditary relationship and since the Semitic culture frequently added the father's name oppositionally X sons of Y to describe heredity. Benet could be used of membership in an extended clan of nation. The sons of Esau, um, Deuteronomy 2, 4, 12, 22, 29, or sons of Judah, Joel 3, 6, are tribal this, designation. Likewise, the frequent expression Israelite, NIV, or children of Israel, the King James Version, most often denote the nation of Israel as a whole. Example, Exodus 13:2, Josiah 13:6, Psalm 148:14. Though it can be described Jacob's own sons from whom the 12 tribes descended, example, Exodus 28:21, from the time of the divided kingdom, children of Israel, King James Version, or people of Israel, um, NIV, may denote the northern 10 tribes as distinguished from Judah and Benjamin in the south. So far, he's literally talking about how it's this family relation of
Mm-hmm.
what the name is. It's like, yes, sometimes you might describe a nation or something like that, but but this nation is tied to an actual ancestor who has this originator. So in similar way, Benet may describe people related to geographical or physical location, the men of Bethlehem, children of Bethlehem, Ezra 2:21, Jeremiah 6:1 describe the Bethlehemites or and the descent and the designation of Babylonian in Ezekiel 23:17 is children of Babylon, likewise a servant in my household. Genesis 15:3 is later a children band of my house, and the phrase of my people, which denotes countrymen. So children of my people. So literally, B'nai is literally talking about is always like relation to people. If it is like a lot, yes, begotten is always from origin, but you can describe of a whole nation. So
Right.
the context. So it's like what he's really talking about is context matters of what he's talking about, and and Benet may also speak of membership within a given social or professional group. The son of perfumers is a perfumer. Uh, Nehemiah 3:8, and the son of singer is uh, there we go. That's what I was trying to do. Is a singer in the same vein. Those who carry out the priestly duties are sons of Levi. Again, son of Levi. B'nai, again, group of people. Deuteronomy 21:15. Ezekiel 8:15, and the son of Aaron. Leviticus 1:5, 11 to 21, as well as sons of Zadok, in common use of Bene, sons of the prophets, most likely denotes those being trained as prophets.
So
Again,
what you're trying to say, I think, after all of this, is that
yeah,
basically the B'nai Elohim are literally family members of the Elohim. When we're talking about the sons of God, um, they're literal. It's not just a some relation that God is making up. He's saying you're literally sons. You're sons of God, right?
yeah, and he talks about the phrase of sons of God in Ultimate Genesis 6:2, 4, Joshua 1:6, 2, 21, 28, Psalms 21:1 may have several meanings. In Job 1:20, 20, sons of God, angels, appears to describe beings of the heavenly host, including Satan's, who have access to God's presence. In 38, 37, sons of God's angels are described along with morning stars, who renders praise
Yes.
to God.
Yeah, see, that's
Likewise,
that's the key part right there, is that
yeah,
sons of God and the
and
sons of the morning star, or morning stars, that they're all the same thing, and we show that there's literally relationships there because they are sons, not just called that. They are literally the relation.
yeah, but there are other times, like the first biblical appearance of sons of God, as the verse the line started in the line. Okay, this dynastic rulers, no men of renown in John in 6:4, who may have ascribed this as divine status or fallen angels. So an important expression it is a bit, in the Old Testament, found in various form is that this use of ben as unicorns areas in all other expression is the word ben is the one following ben is distinctly different kind of in the phrase of sons of man. The two refer to the same entity. But the son of man is essentially a human being. Because when Ezekiel is repeatedly referred as son of man, so basically it's like this whole thing is like it's literally like, yeah, the point, the way he's using in the Old Testament is if it's about a group of people, then they make it clear the context that the Son of Man is about a group of people, but is but it is begotten. It's about a relationship between people, and it does not have this title distinguished from one person or another. It's like literally like this is an actual son. This is something
Hmm.
related to it. And
Okay,
so 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 so
we
so
need to.
so 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 going back to where I was going back to Tertullian, this whole thing about big begotten. He will
Hmm.
use this kind of Tertullian will understand this kind of begotten in the first place. He's not using this kind of begotten that modern day Trinitarian will use. When he says that Jesus is begotten from the Father, he will use in the same sense as what the Old Testament is saying that that a person being born out of another person. That's the
That's right.
and it was shown, and that's the whole point of me quoting him is to show going back. Word have meaning. Word
Hmm.
has power. What he means and context matters. So if Jesus is begotten, it means that he's being born. That's the
Yes,
point.
that's the point. Yes.
That's the
So
point.
yeah, I mean,
I'm
and
sorry. I'm sorry. This was a huge quote, but I had to do it to really show the point.
yes, I understand. He was saying that the son was literally born. There was a nativity. He was the literal son of. There's a womb. He spoke and he was emitted. He was at one time he had this previous existence, but he came and into another existence with his own mind and his own will, and that's what Tertullian is saying. Um, and then so
So
what we see here So what we see here is when we continue on with Tertullian, this is still in chapter 11. He says, "Observe also the Spirit speaking of my Father, of the Father and the Son in character of third person. The Lord said to my Lord, sit on my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Likewise, in the words of Isaiah, thus saith the Lord to the Lord, mine anointed. Likewise, in the same prophet, he says to the Father respecting the Son, Lord, who has believed our report? And to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? We brought a report to him as if he were a little child, as if we were a root in a dry ground and had no form or comeliness." He's talking about two powers in heaven, two Lords, two Jehovahs, two Yahwehs, two
yeah,
separate I ams that they are, and he's using these verses. I mean, he quotes verse after verse to show that there are two powers in heaven, two gods in heaven, two Yahwehs.
yes, and and yes, and I absolutely agree. And by the way, like I do have some things I want to talk about in this chapter. So, but I do agree. So and this is something that I love about Tertullian. He just keeps quoting scripture about in the Old Testament that
Mm-hmm.
shows the subordinationism of Jesus. I'm
Yep.
sorry, it refutes this idea that Jesus is only subordinate is the human nature.
Right.
This in,
Yeah.
this entire idea. Like I know it was Augustine who started to argue that Jesus was only like subordinate to human nature, but I'm not sure how Eastern Orthodox started to argue the same way.
Well, they
But it's
had to once you get homoousios and the fact that they're the same thing, basically the same existence. You have
yeah,
to try to figure out how the same existence can then be subordinate in manifestations. I mean,
yeah,
a manifestation, it doesn't have a real existence. It's just a manifestation of the same thing. Like if you see a blue 1967 Camaro, and you see it on the road at one point in time, and then later you see that same 1967 Camaro, that blue, with the same paint job. You have to assume that they're the same car. And that's basically what they're saying, is that the Father and the Son are the same car. You're just seeing them two separate times in different manifestations. That's the Trinity. It's the same car.
Yeah, and yes, and the next section, like I'm just going to summarize. Okay, it's basically it's more things about like there's talking about like you need to be logical. Um, it has to be to existence. It um, if it's not logically coherent, it cannot be from God. And honestly, the point that I am that I want um, um, to emphasize, it goes back of what I was saying about like how um, um, God cannot do about he has to be logical consistent. He has to be consistent in his words, and in many ways, Antithesis is Arius was more logical than Antithesis because the fact that Antithesis believes there's only one God.
Mm-hmm.
It defies logic, and that is something that is just driving the point over and over again in this section.
Right. And so there's this section right here where a lot of Trinitarians will take this out of context too. He says, still in these few quotations, the distinction of persons in the Trinity is clearly set forth. So what we see is, yeah, there's two different persons here. The problem is that to Tertullian, a person was a being. Every single person that he's talking about is a separate being. He didn't have this concept of, well, there's these three persons in one being. He never says that. He never says that a person is not a being. So when we see these things with Tertullian, you can't take them out of context. You can't just say, well, yeah, persons are not beings, because to Tertullian they were individual beings.
Yeah, yeah, it is something that yeah, because if you have an existence, you at least have your own persons. Again, going back to the argument about the wives and the wives and the husbands. Guess what? The husband has his own being. The wife has his own being. His own existence. It's it has to be this own separate identity.
Right.
It is not this and yes, we're repeating the same thing over and over again. But this point cannot drive home enough that they
Exactly.
they have to have their own existence.
And not
Otherwise,
only that,
it
but
goes otherwise it just goes contradicts logic.
and not only that, but other translations completely take out the word person here, because it doesn't make logical sense in the way that Tertullian is describing it. By these passages, therefore, few as they are, the distinction within the Trinity, within Tertullian's Trinity, not within modern day Trinity, the distinction is clearly set forth. And he's talking about the
Okay,
distinction being separate individual beings.
yeah, I have a long quote from Tertullian, but but the part I really love about this quote is usually Trinitarian will use those quotes as to prove Jesus being the Messiah. But what is Tertullian is using those quotes, he's actually making Jesus a lesser divine being. And I'm going to start quoting it here. Then other utterance also of the Father concerning the Son by the mouth of Isaiah. Behold, my Son, whom I have chosen, my beloved, in whom I am well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and shall bring forth judgment to the Gentile. Isaiah 42:1. Here also what he says to the Son is great things for you, that you shall be called my son, to raise the tribes of Jacob, and to restore the dispersed of Israel. I am giving you for a light to the Gentile, that you may be their salvation to the earth. Isaiah 49:6. Here now the Son orders respecting the Father. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel unto men. He speaks of himself likewise to the Father in a psalm. Forsake me not until I have declared the might of your arms to all the generation that is to come. Also to the same purport in another psalm. O Lord, how are they increased the trouble of me? But almost all the songs which prophesy of the person of the Christ represent the Son as conversing with the Father. That is, represent Christ as speaking to God. Observe also the Spirit speaking of the Father and the Son is the character of the third person. The Lord said to my Lord, sit on my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Likewise, in the words of Isaiah, thus says the Lord to the Lord my anointed. Isaiah 45:1. Likewise, is the same prophet. He says to the Father respecting the Son. Just give me a second. Ah, da, 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 do, 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 do. There we go.
Says to the
Respecting
Father,
the Son
respecting the Son.
to the
Yeah,
Son.
go ahead.
No, 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 my like I scrolled down too far enough, so I had to go scroll back up.
Okay. I've got it
Lord,
on the
there we
screen.
go.
So,
Okay. Lord, who has believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed. We brought a report concerning him, as if he were a little child, as if he were rooted in a dry ground, who had no form, no commonalities. Isaiah 4:53, 1, 2. These are a few testimony of out of many, for we do not pretend to bring up all the passages of Scripture, because we have tolerably large accumulation of them in the various heads of subject, as we in our several chapters call them into our witness in the fullness of their dignity and authority. Still, in this quotation, the distinct of person in the Trinity is clearly set forth. There is the Spirit Himself who speaks, and the Father to whom He speaks, and the Son whom He speaks. In the same manner, the other passages also establish each one of the several persons in each special character addressed as they are in some case are the Father or the Son respecting the Son, in others the Son or the Father concerning the Father, and again in others to the Holy Spirit. These passages, he literally tried to quote these passages
hmm
as a way to say Jesus and the Son are the Son and the Father are two separate beings.
right.
There's no mention whatsoever. It's only in his human nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Especially
is-
pre-incarnation. He's talking pre-incarnation.
exactly. And the idea, and so this again, this passage alone just refutes eternity. It just like
hmm
obliterates. And in some ways, it's like I know some Trinitarian, and that goes back to what I was saying in the beginning about the two powers of heaven, because what kind of passage to prove the Jewish doctrine of the angel of the Lord? They will quote these kind of passages. So
Right.
the idea, so the idea of 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 like people like Michael Heiser, who tries to to quote the Trinity from the Old Testament and saying that that is supposed to Trinitarian doctrine. I'm like, it least this is a issue that we have with Protestant, where you have one Protestant will say one thing about the Trinity, and another Protestant will say another thing. They can't even agree what is the doctrine of Trinity in the first place.
Yeah, that's the big problem, is that the Trinitarians do not understand their own Trinitarian doctrine. They think that somehow that what we're talking about is, it's still the Trinity. Well, it's not, because the Trinity defies them from having their own minds and their own wills. If they have their own mind and their own will, that's not your Trinity. The Trinity says that they have a single mind, a single will, and that they are separate manifestations, even if they're simultaneous manifestations. That, God can simultaneously manifest it. Now, we showed this in the last time with my puppet show, my sock puppet show. You can still manifest at the same time, but there's still a single mind. And if you don't recognize that they have separate minds, separate wills, then, and if you do recognize that they're separate minds and separate wills, that's two gods. Okay. You're talking about two gods, because if they're a single mind and a single will, then you're talking about the Trinity. If you reject the
And,
single mind, single will model, then you are not a Trinitarian. That's just basically it.
yeah, yeah, and there's one. Okay, so there's one argument that that I am keep that I keep thinking in my head. I'm not completely familiar with it, but I do know there's some sort of council, like a church council, where they were discussing if Jesus had. Oh yes, I remember you talking about. Does Jesus, in his human nature, has his own will that is in his divine nature? Something
Yes,
along those
that's how
lines.
they get around it. Is they try to make that his human nature has a separate mind and will, where, Tertullian is talking about before the incarnation. He isn't talking
Yeah,
about the
it's
incarnation. He's
and
not talking about hypostatic union. He's not talking about, oh, Jesus came into a body and therefore got his own mind and will when he was incarnated into, his human nature. No, he's talking everything that, if you believe one mind and one will pre-incarnation,
yeah,
that's what the Trinity is. The Trinity is one mind and one will pre-incarnation, and there's no difference between that and modalism.
yeah.
It's the same
Because
thing.
and even if you take the concept that Jesus in his human nature has a different will that has his own separate will than his divine nature, it defies logic. Is how can you like again going back to it has to be logical consistent. How can you have a being in two separate nature has two separate will?
Hmm.
It makes no sense.
Yeah. So
It's like
I think what you're saying is that, so if Jesus had his own mind and his own will, and then came to his human nature, which gave him another mind and another will, then Jesus has two minds and two wills within his own hypostatic union nature.
yeah, exactly, exactly. They will say that there's one God and three distinct person, but they were saying that the one God that is divine nature, there's one will, and then in Jesus, in the human nature, has a separate will.
Hmm. So that means we're talking about three wills here. We're talking about three minds and three wills. We're talking about the Father has his own mind and his own will. The Logos pre-incarnate has his own mind and his own will. And then his human nature, when he became incarnate, has his own mind and his own will. That's three separate natures for the Trinity. That's not including the Spirit, the Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's just like the more you think about it, the more it's like defies logic. It's like how can you default like And they never actually. That's the one thing I don't think I've ever heard is like, does the Father has his own separate will?
Yeah.
It doesn't discuss it. They'll say, "Oh, yeah, God has a separate will than the Son, because and it's a human nature." Then, but if the Father does, but if the Father is God, then how does the Father doesn't have his own will? Then is separate from the Son. How can they
Right.
be distinct? The more you think about it, the more it defies logic.
It
It
does.
makes
Yeah. It's which is why we recognize that there was absolute apostasy, and that any Trinitarian who's trying to claim the actual Trinity of these three wills now, I mean, it's just stupid. I mean,
yeah, and yeah, but they would say that there's like two different will, but they would never actually mention the Father, as I said. But yeah, you're technically correct. It would be three separate will. But
three separate
again,
minds. Yep.
but
So
but at the same time, how can that be? If and how and it goes even further. Like, at what point is the divine will and Jesus' will, the human nature, the will, does not intercede? Like, how does a person, like Jesus, would be able to say that that is my divine will versus my human will? How do like would it not have this conflict of, wait a second, in my divine nature, I actually know about what's going to happen, but in my human nature, would that not actually mean he actually knows it? But how can that be if he doesn't know?
it,
It just creates
it
more and more.
hypostatic
It's,
union screws everything up. Yep.
yeah, it just
It makes
makes.
him double mind. He makes him a some multiple personality schizophrenic. I mean, that's basically what it is.
Yeah, it's. Yes, I wanted to. Yes. Let's see. Do I have anything else
So
for this?
so Tertullian is teaching that they are two separate minds, two separate wills, pre-incarnate. And then when Jesus
Yeah,
becomes carnate, when during the incarnation, when he enters into his human body, he takes his pre-incarnate mind and will with him into the incarnation and becomes man. So still two minds, two wills, okay? But Jesus doesn't have this human natured mind and will. He takes his divine will and enters into a human body. And that's what
exactly.
this is what Tertullian is teaching. So, that again, this is not the Trinity, because there's no hypostatic union in Tertullian's understanding. He wouldn't even begin to try to 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 try to claim a hypostatic union. It's one mess trying to fix another mess, which just creates a layer of one lie built upon another lie until it just all blows up. And we can completely see these lies falling apart, this tower of lies falling apart, when we're reading Tertullian and the plane and the logic that he's using. So
Yeah, it's such a, yeah, and it's just, the more you think about it, the more you're just like, it just debunks of the Trinity. And for those who says that, but but Tony was a heretic. He was, guess what?
not for his
He
Trinity
was
teachings.
not for his Trinity teachings. Like, it was only because I was his heretic for his Montanist teachings. He was only
Yes,
declared heretic for that specific belief.
right.
So everything else, when he talks about Trinity, guess what? It's completely doctrinal. That's what Christianity was taught at that time, and he cannot declare to be a heretic for his belief.
Right. So let's see if we could get through chapters 12, at least chapter 12 here, because there's a lot here too, and
I know, I know, I know, I
chapter
know.
13.
And,
But so I start off right with chapter 12 here at the very beginning. He says, if the number of the Trinity also offends you, as it were not connected to the simple unity, I would ask how it is possible for a being who is merely the absolute one and singular to speak in plural phrase, saying, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, whereas he ought to have said, let me make man in my own image and after my own likeness, as being a unique and singular being. Okay. Again, he's not separating. He's saying every person out there is its own being. He is not distinguishing any difference between this personality and a being, because a personality, if you have a multiple personality disorder, you don't have your own mind. You have
yeah,
these different personalities that you're playing. And so, you can't really talk to yourself and say, well, I'm going to make man in my own image. He doesn't say that. He said, let us make man in our own image, because us has two different beings.
yeah. It again. By the way, I actually have that same passage as quoted because I want to discuss it. And yes, it's like, yeah, this passage is usually what Trinity usually proves. Like, oh, here's a Trinity in this passage. Guess what? Tertullian is using this passage as a way to refute modalism, as a way to
Mm-hmm.
say that there has to be have its own um, separate being existence. Yes, no, he's not it's not exactly using the same way as I know a lot of Old Testament scholar we use that passage. And this is the difference between the New Testament versus Old Testament, because a lot of Old Testament scholar we use that passage as a way to say it's about a divine counsel.
Mm-hmm.
That even at that point in creation, the us means the angels, the gods in heaven, and they were part of the creation.
Yep. Yeah. And,
So,
and you kind of, you hinted on this here, but it's interesting because it says, or was it to the angels that he spoke as the Jews interpret the passage? Because these also acknowledge not the Son. So, was God just speaking to angels at this point? Let us make man in our image. So how does that work? If he's speaking to angels, then how were man made in angels' images? It
yeah,
doesn't make
but
sense.
if angels are actually sons of gods, as we were talking earlier, as like the begetting and beneal, that it means that the angels were they're actual sons of the Father, which going back to what Joseph Smith saying that we're all part of the heavenly councils and things. So guess what? If the us is a reference of the divine council of there's multiple gods, then
Mm-hmm.
then it means that the us created in their image means that we're created with body and shapes, that God was like a man, which going back to that documentary I was talking about the autonomy of God, where God literally not only have a physical body, he also had sex with his wives.
Yeah. When we get into that, let's not
But
let's not go there. Let's
I
not
know,
go
I know, I know, I know,
there.
I know, I know, I know, I know, but I just using just
Uh,
simple logic to get
yeah.
to what the us actually means and what an angel means, and that's the basic logic. Just saying.
Yeah. No, so to Tertullian, and this is where we depart from him a little bit here, is that he says that for let us make and in our image, he says, and become and that man has become as one of us. For with whom did he make man, and to whom did he make him like? The answer must be the Son, on the one hand, who was to one day put on human nature, and the Spirit on the other, who was to sanctify man. So I find this interesting that he made man with both flesh as to what the Son was going to look like in the future, and then also with the Spirit, having a spirit within us, as to indicate that that we are made also in the image of the Holy Spirit. So this is a departure from what we believe. We admit that Tertullian did not teach everything, you know, uh, in line with what Joseph Smith taught, but this is something that Tertullian believed, and we recognize that he thought that the Son was he made
That's
man in the future image of his Son, which doesn't
this.
make
Okay,
sense.
this is this interesting because the News Advent has a slightly different translation. Oh, why are you went dark again?
I'm using New Advent. I'm using New Advent. I literally quoted New Advent. If you want to go down to
Oh,
this translation,
or am I looking at something different? Because I am reading. Um,
no, I'm using New Advent. So
okay.
he purposely adopted the plural phrase. You can see it on the screen here. He purposely adopted the plural phrase, let us make and in our image and become as one of us. For with whom did he make man? The Son. He made the Son, or he made man with the Son, is what he's saying. And whom did he make him like? The answer must be the Son on one hand, who is to one day put on human nature. So he made man in the image of the Son, who would one day look like man, which gets
Oh,
really
I see.
confusing.
Okay. I see what has happened. You went further ahead than what I was what I had note with. That's where
Oh, okay.
the this. Okay, so um, so tu- 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 tu. um, okay. So in the following passage, however, behold, the man has become as one of us. Genesis 3:22. He's either deceiving or amusing us in his speaking plurality. If he's one is one only and singular, or was it to the angels that he spoke, as the Jews interpreted the passage? Because these also acknowledge not the Son, or was it because he was once the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit? That thus he spoke to himself in plural term, making himself plural on that very account. Nay, it is because he had already so close at his high as a second person, his own word, as a third person also, the spirit in the word that he purposely adopted the plural phrase, let us make let us make in our image, and become one of us one. With whom did he make man? And those whom he make him like. The answer must be the Son on the one hand, who was the day of the human nature, and he is talking about that, and the Spirit of the other, the second mind. With these, he then speak in the unity of the Trinity, as with his ministry and witness. In the following text, also distinguish among the person. So God created man in his own images. In the image of God created he him. This one to say, why say image of God? Why not his own image merely? If he was only one with the maker, and he there was not only one whose image he made man, but there was one in whose image God was making man. That's to say, Christ's image, who being one day about become man more. Yes, so basically that's where I'm being caught up. So yeah, okay, so I had to kind of like yeah. So I had the whole process quoted, and you were like picking it apart. I was getting
Yeah.
confused.
Okay.
So that so
I
that's
don't want to read the entire thing. I mean, it's it's good to read certain passages and then to
yeah,
discuss those passages
yeah, I know,
and
I know,
talk
I know, I
about them
know,
because it gets
I know. But okay, so now I get where you're coming from. Okay, so here's the thing that I was going to talk about. Yes, I agree with you, and how like I didn't think about how there is a view of man is a little different than us, because he's talking about like the likeness is more about its attributes, which is one of the issues of about like you hear about a lot of Catholic and Eastern Orthodox would talk about theosis, is like God was created not exactly in with body and shapes like the Father, but in his attributes of what love and kind, that kind of things.
right. Yeah.
Uh, but the point I was going to make, um, is he was trying to quote, uh, he's trying he's comparing man to the monarchy of God as a way to kind of say, um, in a sense that, yes, in a sense that God is our separate being, but he's still trying to make a connection between man and God.
Yeah.
A, a Trinitarian will never make this such comparison, because they say there's this gigantic a gulf that man cannot be in any shape and form be like God at all. Yes, it can be
Right.
like it is an attribute, but he's a but making
But we
part.
can never become his nature.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And here's Tertullian. He's kind of like, yes, there is this like slight difference. However, we're still going to be part of the Godhead of that monarchy.
Hmm. And here's where he really starts to separate them, and he actually quotes, um, you know, Trinitarians, they love to quote John 1:1.
Yeah, yeah,
This is
yeah.
like their go-to verse. And here
Yes,
Tertullian, he quotes John 1:1 and he rips it apart and he totally destroys Trinitarian understanding of this verse.
yeah.
And he
Go
doesn't
ahead,
just do
read
it
it.
here. Yeah.
Yeah,
So now if he
yeah, read
too
it.
is God, he's talking about the word is God. If well, in fact, let me go back here. So he means I mean the word of God. So we're talking about the word of God, through whom all things were made and without whom nothing was made. Now, if he too is God, according to John, and the word was God, John 1:1, then you have two beings. You have two beings, two existences. What do you call two existences in heaven? One that commands the thing to be made, and the other that executes the order and creates. In one sense, however, you ought to understand him to be another, as I have already explained, on the grounds of personality, not of substance, in the way of distinction, not of division. So, in other words, the Son isn't going to go out and do his own thing. He is not going to go out and create his own thing without the Father telling him what to create. So they are in a unity that way. They are a unity. They are not separate in their creations. He's not going to go out and do whatever, something that the Father doesn't tell him to do. So this is what he's saying, is that there are two separate beings. I love this.
Yeah, and then it goes on even more.
He does. He goes on even more.
one that commands that that things are made, and the other that is the order that creates. In what sense, however, you ought to understand him to to another. I've already explained on the ground of personality. Okay, but although I must everything hold one of only one substance in three coherent and inseparable persons, yet I am bound to acknowledge from the necessity of the case that he who issues a command is different from whom for him who executes it. For indeed, he will not be issuing a command if we're all the while doing the work himself, while ordering it to be done by the second. But still, he did issue the command, although he will not have intended to command himself if he were only one, or else he will have worked without any command, because he will not have waited to command himself. Holy cow! So when the Bible says that Jesus was sent by God, it means they are two separate beings. Therefore, it has nothing to do about his human nature, but literally about how they're two gods, and one God was sent another God.
Two
That's literally what
powers.
it's. Two
Two
powers.
powers in heaven. Yep.
It's like um
And and so we get further because he keeps going right on with that idea. He says, "Well, then you reply, if he was God who spoke, and he was also God who created at this rate, one God spoke and another created, and thus two gods are declared." Yeah, two gods are declared. Now this is Praxeus, who's uh, he's Tertullian is quoting Praxeus, who's accusing Tertullian. Okay, so Praxeus is saying, "Well, yeah, you're teaching two gods, right?" And Tertullian's saying, "Yeah." Basically, he says, "If you are so adventuresome and harsh, reflect a while. That while you may think the better and more deliberately, listen to the psalm in which two are described as God." Now, this is interesting because the other translation says, "If you are so obtuse, keep your opinion for the time, and to make you hold this opinion still more, listen to the mention of two gods even in this psalm." That's why I don't like the other translation. He's basically saying, Tertullian says, "Look, the psalm says two gods. Thy throne, God, is forever, everlasting, and thy rod a kingdom. Thou hast loved righteousness and hated iniquity. God, therefore, thy God, hath anointed thee." He's teaching two gods. Now, we have to understand in which way he's teaching two gods and in which way Tertullian is teaching one God, because, again, they're one God in unity. And I want to throw down, there's, uh, jump down to chapter 23 here, just real quick, because this is a kind of a key statement. Um, see if I can find it real quick. Let's see, even if we were to maintain, I'll find it real quick. Okay, here we are. We are in chapter 23. Okay. And he says, "Were we to even maintain that they are two separate gods, as you are so fond of throwing out against us, it would be more tolerable assertion than the maintenance of so versatile and changeful as the God of yours." So he's acknowledging that there's this idea that, yeah, they're in one way, they're two separate gods, and even if we were to maintain that, says it's still better than your Trinity, your modalism, because your modalism is illogical.
yeah. Yeah, it's coming back to what I keep saying over and over again. You have to be logical consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And and what and what I said here is This is subordinationism, where Jesus is a lesser divine being who is subordinate to the Father. It's the it's like again it goes back to the two powers of heaven. The idea that this is where Michael Heiser is wrong. He's trying to say there's a species unique, but guess what? If there are two separate beings, then it cannot be
So,
the Trinity.
so I found this footnote pretty hilarious. It's kind of funny because he's saying, secondary when he's talking about secondary nature. So this is Tertullian, and he's trying to, quote Tertullian. He says secondary, in other words, not inferior, but derived, deduced from the other. So it's derived from inferior, as an irrigation canal is deduced from a river. So he says Tertullian seems here to come completely perilously to subordinationism. Really? Yeah, because Tertullian is a subordinationist. Yes, Tertullian is a subordinationist because he says here, but Tertullian seems here to come perilously near to subordinationism. Tertullian is a subordinationist.
I love the term about subordinationism. This just goes back to 1920, and he's talking
Yeah,
about subordinationism even then. It's like it's
and he's talking about it like it's a heresy, but we know from modern day scholars that subordinationism was the orthodoxy of the day.
yeah.
Subordinationism, we have quotes over and over and over again from modern day scholars who confirm that subordinationism was the orthodox teachings of the nature of God before Nicaea. In fact, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and read a few because I can.
I was literally about to do the same thing. If you can actually do it, go ahead.
Yeah, here we go. RPC Hansen, he says, indeed, until Athanasius began writing, every single theologian, East and West, Tertullian was a Western theologian, had postulated some form of subordinationism. It could, about the year 300, have been described as a fixed part of universal theology, Orthodox or Catholic theology. Subordinationism, this is in the Oxford Encyclopedia of the Early Christian Church. And I actually have that. Here we go. The Oxford Dictionary of the Early Christian Church. You open it up and it says subordinationism. Thus, we call the tendency strong in the theology of the second and third centuries to consider Christ as the Son of God inferior to the Father. Behind this tendency were gospel statements in which Christ himself stressed this inferiority, and it was developed especially by the Logos Christology. This theology, partly under the influence of Middle Platonism, considered Christ, Logos, and divine wisdom as the means of liaison and mediation between the Father's position to him. When the conception of the Trinity was enlarged to include the Holy Spirit as in origin, this in turn was considered inferior to the Son. Subordinationist tendencies are evident especially in theologians like Justin Martyr, Tertullian, Origen, and Novatian, but even in Irenaeus, to whom Trinitarian speculations are alien. Commenting on John 4:28, has no difficulty in considering Christ inferior to the Father. One more. Subordinationism, teaching about the Godhead, which regards either the Son as subordinate to the Father or the Holy Ghost as subordinate to both. It is a characteristic tendency in much of Christian teachings of the first 3 centuries and is a marked feature of such otherwise orthodox fathers as St. Justin and Origen. I mean, you can go on and on. Subordinationism was the orthodox standard teaching, the universal Catholic, small c Catholic teaching of the early Christian church before Nicaea, and Nicaea screwed them all up. And so here we see, this guy, he's recognizing that Tertullian seems to come perilously near subordinationism. Well, he was a subordinationism because that was the Orthodox theology, and that is not the Trinity. So we need to wrap this up here. We've got 10 more minutes, and we made it to chapter 13. But if there's anything else that you want to discuss of what we've already been talking about, to be honest here, I have the Latin version here. This is the Latin version right here. Go to tertullian.org. You can look up Latin, and we see in these Latin texts, we see that they're not translating them properly. When we take, let's see, duo di predicantur right here, right? Let's just take this over and we'll just translate it into Google Translate. What do we see? We see duo di predicantur, two gods are preached. Wait a second. He doesn't say this in this translation. He doesn't say, well, he does say two gods are declared. But let's go a little further. Let's go down to, let's see. Let's go to the, let's see, where did it go? All right. Well, I've got it copied here. Let's take this, the Salmo. Let's see. Whoops. Okay, right here. Yeah. We'll just take this and copy this, and we'll take this and plug it into Google Translate. Take the two gods mentioned in the psalm. Take the two gods mentioned in the psalm. Two gods. Duos Deos. Two gods. We don't see that kind of language here.
No.
So when we look at the original Latin, this guy you can tell he's a Trinitarian, and you can tell he's trying to hide some of these translations behind his own personal bias. Tertullian is teaching, we'll get into this next time, because chapter 13 teaches two separate gods, two powers in heaven, who are one in unity, but there are two powers in heaven, one who does everything that the other commands. And I find this translation extremely biased, and I'm glad I'm able to go through this and identify where he's just not being accurate. It really helps to have this other translation by Suter. So
Yeah, like honestly speaking, this is why I want to learn Latin, is to literally show that kind of things. Is like to create my own translation, to say these they're not accurate. They're not like we know when or like we know like and this is something I hear about. This is a critique that I have of like people like Dan McKillen and like David Kipp. They're like, oh yeah, we translate the Bible correctly. Correctly is like, yes, if you're a scholar, technically you're translating correctly. But for a layman, a lot of times there are mistranslation, and it's not actually like you're not conveying the idea what the actual text is trying to say.
right. Yes, that's the problem. Is you have to convey what the author is saying rather than interpreting when you're translating. You can't just say, "Oh, well, this is what I think he said." No, you have to convey his own meaning rather than overriding your own personal bias over it.
Yeah, it's and even when you try to do like word to word translation, which some people do, like it still doesn't work because
Mm-hmm.
because language norms is different. I'm going to use an example, just a little bit in French and English. Je suis un homme. Um, I am a man. This is not this is not a good example. Sometimes sometimes I run into like the verb is you're like the sentence structure is like it's like in reverse. It would be like I am a man, but in French it would be like I'm a man. I am a man. Uh, the man I am, or something like that. It's like
Mm-hmm.
there's just is like the wording is like in reverse.
Yes, yeah. You have to kind of pick out, what the object of the sentence is, the verbs and the nouns, and you have to
Yeah,
identify and convey what the author is saying rather than what your own, personal beliefs are trying to overwrite that. And the New Advent translation is just a bad translation. So, yeah.
By the way, you said to me earlier that we were gonna get to chapter 15. We're gonna run out of material.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, we I did say we would make it to chapter 15. We didn't even make it. We made it 3 chapters.
yeah, and I
I
work
guess
at
4 chap. We made 10, 11, and 12, right? So we're on 13. So we
yeah,
made it to 4 chapters, but oh boy. Yeah, there's so much to cover here. I mean, Tertullian was not
yeah,
a Trinitarian. He was teaching this idea that, uh, the Father and Son were completely separate individuals and beings and had their own minds, their own wills, their own reasoning, their own logos. He literally says that the logos had his own logos. So, you can't in any way interpret this as being the Trinity. There's just no way that, the Trinity that
and
came out of Nicaea is the
and
same
people,
Trinity Tertullian was teaching.
yeah, and people like Paul who like read the synopsis of the whole text. It's like, oh, I agree with what he's saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If you try to do the word concept fallacy, if you try to
Hmm.
put your own ideas into the text and not actually taking the time to learn what he actually means by these terms.
By reading and understanding the text, the entire
Yeah,
text, not just cherry picking out and doing a find and say, oh yeah, well look at these terms. Yes, see he taught the Trinity. No, no, he
no,
used the word, but that's about it.
it's so ridiculous. It's like this is where I'm like there like this is why I like Protestant like I accuse the Protestant to be dishonest is
Hmm.
they will they will lie up the yin yang and then say, "Oh, you
Yeah,
don't know what you're talking about."
yeah. I challenge to have inspiring philosophy. Come and debunk you and I here. Reading chapter by chapter and debunk our interpretation of these things because
Yeah,
you can't just go through and cherry pick and expect to understand. You know, you have to go chapter by chapter and understand these concepts to identify this because they will lie their butts off, and he did. Inspiring
yeah,
philosophy lied his freaking butt off.
yeah. Yes, and I agree. Is like, and if you say, yeah, I'm more than willing to debate this dude on
Yeah.
Tertullian. It's like you want to say the Tertullian thought of Trinity or any other Trinitarian out there who wants to say Tertullian was a Trinitarian? Come on, come debate us.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Because
All
there's
right.
no way he was a Trinitarian.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you, my friend. It has been
You're welcome.
a lot of fun, and I'm going to go ahead and sign off.
Yeah. See ya.